Hello, fellow human light beings. This is Mahadeva, the Thunder Wizard. This is the solar flash update for October 30th, 2023. So today I'm going to delve more into NAGAS, what they really are, at least from my experience, how they interact with all of the different dimensions, and what is the real duality when we deal with the base of all dimensions and the highest awareness of all dimensions. Excuse me. All right, we're going to just get right into that. Welcome back to the channel. Before I get into that, of course, I have to keep the lights on here. So bear in mind, this channel is not here just for you to listen to me talk, although, of course, you're welcome to do that. And I'm grateful for everybody who does show up and listen. But the shift that we are making is going to require that we shift our frequency up. And I'm going to be talking to you about frequencies and dimensions today. So if you're like me, you're going to need some help. You're going to need to take some specific actions to shift your frequency up so that you can actually be a part of this new higher harmonic of Earth that is in the process of being created. So before you do anything, if you're new to my channel, what I want you to do is go on to the playlists. Those are on the Thunder Wizard channel, and look for the playlists. First thing I want you to do is start doing the Awakening the Immortals, which should be in the playlist of Qigong. And then I'd like for you to do the guided interdimensional meditation, which is, there's another playlist for that, and that is free on the YouTube channel. And then I'd like for you to go and take a look at 5D, the 12 steps to 5D, and do what I tell you to do in those videos. If you're doing that, at least one of those things on a daily basis, I guarantee you that the frequency within you will shift, and then the things I talk about will be helpful for you to navigate that shift. I also am still giving away every single one of my video courses, including astrology certification, rune certification, and what I was originally charging $3,500 or something for the 5-element Maoshan spirit fighting moving forms. And all of those things can be found at 923.thunderwizard.com. Again, I'm giving it away for almost nothing. And my books, you can get at michaelwilliamdenny.com. Interdimensional Revolution, Extraterrestrials Are Coming to Earth, and most important is the Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life. And when you are ready, actually, you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait. This is, most people like me, I like to test things out. I like to test drive a car before I buy it. But you don't have to wait. When you're ready to start doing the energy practices that I'm doing and that other people are doing on this channel to bring that shift, where you combine all three of the energy, Kundalini, Chi, and the electromagnetic energy of the heart, go here to thunderwizard.com and subscribe. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. All right. So today we're going to be talking about NAGAS and why reptilians are necessary for awakening. So I'm going to put the video on here. I was going to do it today. I'm too wiped out, too tired from surfing. But in the future, I'm going to put a video that I made a while back, probably 6 years ago. And I was making a video trying to explain to people what reptilians really are and what NAGAS really are. Now, bear in mind, I was writing fiction. It was a creative way to create a mythology to tell the truth as I saw it, because, there's this huge problem people have, as you know. I'm constantly battling people's victim mentality. And there is so much misinformation, outright lies, people conflating and projecting as well, well-meaning people who are taking their experience, which is laced with victim mentality, and they project it onto the world. And this is where the common understanding of reptilians has come from. And as you know, I'm not a fan of David Icke. David Icke, in my opinion, I can't prove this, it's not a diagnosis, but in my opinion, I believe he has a mental illness. And he has, in fact, when he first started talking about reptilians, he talks about how he did this research. And I'll tell you what the research was. Right after he came to the world and told the world that he was the Son of God, that he was the second coming of Jesus, and that didn't land very well. You may not know that he did that, but he did. When that didn't land very well, he then started talking about the reptilians. Now, let me be clear. The Illuminati exist. There is a cabal of very rich, powerful black magicians who have all kinds of technology and access to all kinds of ancient magic and all kinds of stuff. And there is an evil, dark force of people ruling the world, but they're humans. So when David Icke started his research, he said he talked, and this is where it all came to him, and he realized what was going on. He talked to somebody who claimed to have been a chambermaid or something like that for the Queen, and claims to have seen the Queen shift into being a reptilian and back. And he said once he heard that, then he knew. So that's when he talks about his research into it, that's what he's talking about. And the reason why I'm pointing him out is not to badmouth him, but the fact that he's so well received and so popular is because we have an experience which is true. We do have an experience of being lied to and controlled, that everything is being manipulated and controlled by the powers that be. They just happen to be very powerful, very rich humans. But when you know that you're being lied to, and the sophistication of that lie is so widespread, having to do with media, having to do with movies, having to do with government, education, I'm to the extent that we are being, the drug companies, hospitals, banks, the petroleum companies, all of these entities are run by a very small group of very rich people. And they do control the information, and they do control a narrative of how society works. And so the feeling that people have of being manipulated and controlled, and that it is a force beyond them, that is a very real feeling. But then to go and project onto it in order to make it make sense to you, somebody comes along and says, oh yeah, there are these evil draconian reptilians who they come from the planet Nibiru and blah, blah, blah. And then, you take Zecharia Sitchin, I've talked about that. He made up that whole Anunnaki alien, astronaut thing. And so the point I'm trying to make is that there are beings that you can classify as reptilians that have a strong influence on reality, but they're not what you think. I was at a UFO mini conference yesterday, and I was speaking there, and it was interesting to see and hear people's thoughts and experiences of what ETs are. But unfortunately, there's another truth, which is when you experience higher dimensional consciousness, the third dimensional response to that is fear. So what we have is conflation. Conflation is when you take something that's partially true, you take something else that's false, you mix it together, you have partial truths mixed in with the false. If you were to experience, if a NAGA, one of these beings. They actually do look like they are giant cobras. They're they're not as small as the animals we have here on Earth. They're I don't know what they are, 6 feet tall or something like that, and they're incredibly powerful. They are the architects of Kundalini in human beings. So again, we've got some conflated truth here. It is true. There's truth when people say that reptilians have implanted chakras into human beings. That's true. Because when we, all of us, that includes you, when we were creating this world and we were creating the human avatars that we wanted to live in, there were multiple light being civilizations and species that were working together. And the Nagas were one of them. And so the Nagas are masters of Kundalini. And so they created, you can call it implant if you want, but we all work together, and what they contributed is they created the Kundalini within the spinal column of human beings. And many of the mantras and yoga, in fact, Patanjali is said to have been a Naga. Nagas are able to shapeshift. They can shapeshift from human into their natural form, which is a giant cobra. Same is true with Sasquatch. Sasquatch can shapeshift from being what we experience them as, these giant, big, hairy, ape-like hominids, bipedal hominids, and they can also shift into shafts of light. They can just disappear into the woods and become a tree. And they can completely shapeshift out of our dimension altogether. So this isn't unusual, but the assumption that a being implanting us with things like chakras and kundalini, that being evil, is an assumption. But I'm giving you a different assumption. We did it. We created this with them. And it's unfortunate, but we have to sift through all of the conflated half-truths, misunderstandings, fears, projections, psyops, and all of that. And we have to, unfortunately, we have to sift through I believe people have mental illness like David Icke, and people who are really into reptilians are usually very emotionally damaged people who are trying desperately to explain what they're experiencing. And again, as I said, if you experience a higher dimensional being, your first response is to be fearful. And so if you come from an assumption that higher dimensional beings want to control you, false beings of light, etc., and you do experience one of these beings, your first response is you're going to go deep into fear, and you're immediately going to say, yes, they're evil, they're demons. This is, again, why way back when the Old Testament was written, the Jews who were creating that fictional account, they took a truth, which is that Nagas come to bring us the esoteric, hidden truth of our divinity. And the knowledge of that divinity will destroy our third dimensional attachment to the narrative, and it feels like death. And that's what the symbolism is. In the biblical tradition, Jehovah is actually the god of ego, the god of the narrative. He makes it very clear. He says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I am that I am." I mean, he's all about the ego. And so really when you worship Jehovah, you're worshiping your own narcissistic third dimensional ego. And the serpent, the Nagas, the beings that bring the occult knowledge of the truth of your essence, they are completely antithetical to your third dimensional ego. And so there's some truth to that. If you eat of the fruit, you will die. You will die to your your childlike immaturity, the need to have the ego's love and approval. And that's the symbolism of being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, is that you're no longer asleep, you're now awake. So I want to read a comment that was left on the channel, because I do ask people if they have questions. They can leave questions in the comment section. I tend not to respond to comments on the live stream, just because I tend to sometimes just get cranky, and I'm not patient enough to really listen to what people say, and people aren't paying attention to what I'm saying, and that annoys me. But I want to go ahead and read this. This was from a few days ago. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. All right, just give me one more second here. If I don't find it, I'll give up, and I'll just do my best. I know I'm not finding it, which is too bad. Give me another 10 or 20 seconds. I should have been ready for this, but as I said, I was very tired today. All right, I don't think I'm going to find it. All right, so it was a question about the Garden of Eden, and it was a question about sin, and it was a question about the Nagas and the serpent and all of that. And so I think I pretty much answered it. I cut through all of that. So I encourage you to spend time on the channel, research the channel. If you have a question about that, Nagas, reptilians, sin, karma, reincarnation, I've talked about that so many times. It's you can just go on the channel and learn how to search for a search term within a YouTube channel. If you don't know how to do it, Google it. How do I search for something within somebody's YouTube channel? And you should be able to figure out how to do it on whatever kind of device that you have. But that's the bottom line of that. So first off, there is no sin. I was asked this question yesterday because I was talking about the mother-father deity who I communicate with. And that the mother deity, she is a solar deity, a deity of pure light and pure love. And the father deity, and they're really two halves of the same essence, they are the consciousness of what we view as the yin and the yang. The father deity, he's dark but filled with all this sort of like popcorn electrical energy. And then somebody asked, oh, is that the balance of the universe, the good and the bad, the light and the dark? And I was grateful for that question, because I have stopped thinking like that. I don't think in those terms anymore. And it is important to understand that evil as we understand it has nothing to do with, like in Star Wars, the balance of the dark and the light, and then there's the dark side of the Force and the light side of the Force. That's not how it works. If you go into the dark side, you will not gain that kind of power. The dark side of the dark force people that are running this world, they do have tremendous technology which to us feels like magic. Even those of us who are aware of all of the technology we have. And again, I listened to somebody yesterday who was talking about a UFO that they had experienced. And they immediately went to an assumption, which is not accurate, but they immediately went to an assumption based on what we all think we know about the technology that humans have. And this person said, oh, that's not a technology that humans have, it must be extraterrestrial. Now, I wasn't there to respond. Had this person asked me, I would have said, no, actually what you described is something that humans actually do have. That is, you've described a human UFO. That isn't necessarily something from actual extraterrestrials. So we've been lied to. And it is very easy to take a look at, the truth of people's misunderstanding about Nagas and reptilians is accurate in that they've experienced, especially if you've been like abducted, if you've been abducted or experimented on, but even without that, if you see, what is happening and how our media hypnotizes people. And it was just recently I saw on Russell, what's his name? I can't remember names when I'm talking. Anyway, Russell Brand. He was showing a clip of something, and it was mainstream media talking about a bunch of nonsense. And he broke it down and said, this is a very well-known method of psychologically influencing somebody. This is a very well-known method of hypnotic induction. And so you are being hypnotized. And there is technology far beyond what we know that can do all kinds of things that feel like magic or feel like psychic powers. And this is one of the ways that the unacknowledged military projects are able to pass for extraterrestrials, because not only do they have technology that we think can only come from outer space, but they also have electromagnetic and psychological weapons that they can use, like laser beams and things like that. They can literally point energy beams into your head and make you see things that aren't there. They do have this ability. And so if you've experienced that, even if you haven't, you sense that this is going on. You intuit that this is going on, which makes you feel even more crazy, which makes you feel like it is a spiritual thing, which then makes it much easier for you to conflate and project. And when somebody like David Icke comes along and says, yes, there are these reptilian beings who live in the Saturn rings, and they're blah, 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 and they have all this technology, and they're evil magicians and all that. It's really easy to buy into that because you know that something like that is going on. But I'm here to tell you it's not being done by reptilians. There is no such thing as the draconian race. Everything you've heard about draconians, and somebody even said recently somewhere, draconians are real, but they're more powerful. I think it was a comment on my channel. The draconians are real and they live in the Kuiper Belt and they're more powerful than humans. And I said, really? Where did you hear that? How do you know that? I'm talking from my own personal experience. I have interacted with demons. I know that lower dimensional beings exist. Very, very evil, very destructive beings, but they are two-dimensional beings that leak into the third dimension, and it is a supernatural thing. It's easy to conflate and perhaps assume that they are higher dimensional evil beings. They're not. Because when it comes to evil, evil is something that cannot exist outside of the density of the third dimension or the second dimension. Once you get above, even in higher octaves of the third dimension, evil can't exist. So since these beings do exist, which we know as Nagas, since these beings do exist, and since they have had a strong influence on the human race, since they have implanted us, they have designed and implanted chakras into us, what is it that they really do? Why are they necessary for our awakening? We see that in the mythology, again, even the distorted, falsified, altered mythology of the Old Testament. The serpent they can't lie about one thing, which is the serpent is saying, if you eat this, you'll become like God. And if you eat it, you will die. But he also says you'll live forever. Right? God is the one that says you'll die. Jehovah, for some reason, doesn't want you to become like him, doesn't want you to see and understand yourself, doesn't want you to awaken. So the Nagas are very important. And Rahu and Ketu, again, now I'm jumping into Vedic astrology. So Rahu and Ketu are the north and south nodes of the moon. They're not actual planets. They are mathematical points. and they determine the eclipses, both lunar and solar eclipses. We just went through that. So the powerful events and the revelations that are going to happen as a result of these two eclipses are directly because of the north and the south node of the moon, known as Rahu and Ketu. And now I'll go back to my experience with Nagas. I've been working with Nagas, well, I've been working with them all my life. If you're doing the Maoshan practices, in case you didn't know, the Maoshan practices that I teach come from the snake clan of the Maoshan. And so, you know, take that for what it is. But I became consciously aware that I was working with Nagas when, after having my first real encounter with extraterrestrials as a result of doing CE5, human-initiated contact with extraterrestrials, I started having all kinds of, you know, totem signs, animals. I was getting messages from physical animals doing weird things in, you know, around me and with me. So it became very clear to me that whenever I interacted with a snake, if a snake appeared, at first I was afraid, because I'd see a snake and it, you know, you take a look at, you know, is it crossing your path? Which way is it going? All these things. And at first I was afraid. Like, first time I saw a snake, I said, uh-oh, something's coming, something nasty, something bad. But actually, every time I saw a snake, I would get some kind of blessing of some kind, or a healing, or awareness. And in one case, as I was coming home, this is when I was in Florida, as I was coming home, those big black snakes that they have, this snake slithered in front of me and in front of the back door of where I was living and into the bushes there. And based on which direction it was coming, etc., etc., what I knew from that is that I was going to be dealing with some past life karmic issues. And that day, I got a very strong calling from the ETs to do some interdimensional meditation. And what ended up happening was, I ended up going back in time. And those of you who are aware of the Hool breath, if you're not aware of it, you can go look for it. You can just Google it anywhere. Hool breath, H-U-U-L, breath. Those of you who are aware of that, you know that about 15 years ago, I was given that mantra because I was doing some high-level work and I was mixing traditions, which you're not supposed to do. And I was doing it on purpose. I was experimenting to go further in the practices that I had, and I gave myself a, you know, energy sickness, and my head was aching all the time, and my energy was all over the place. And I just went into meditation, and I just, out of desperation, just asked if there's any, you know, guides out there, please give me a one-syllable mantra breath so that I can balance and cure myself of this energy imbalance. And what I received was the Hool breath. While I was doing that, I was transported back in time, and I was in a cave with a bunch of cave paintings. It had to have been like 30,000 years ago, and I was sitting there on the floor of this cave, and there were people chanting this sound. And I became aware, as a result of doing some research on it, that it was the name of Hulda, which, if you know anything about Hulda, Hulda is the Earth Mother goddess for the Germanic tribes people, the pre-Christian Germanic peoples. And it turns out that she is the oldest of the polytheist gods in Europe. The oldest one you find will be Hulda. And I thought that was interesting. And so I became aware that I had somehow been reintroduced to a practice that was done by our, 30,000-year-old European ancestors in caves and, all of that. So all of that tradition that I'm sharing with you came from that experience. So the snake, getting back to the snake showed up one day, and the way he crossed my path and I followed him, he was basically telling me to go into the back portion of my house where I do all of my energy work and to meditate. So I did, and I could feel the energy from the higher dimensional beings, calling me to do some work. So I went in there and I went into meditation, and what ended up happening is that I was taken back into time, and I was taken back to that same cave. This is where it gets weird, creepy, and your own grandfather kind of thing. It just gets weird. But you remember the first time that I received that, I was taken in meditation and shamanic journey, and I was in that cave, and I was meditating with a bunch of other people, and there was somebody up there that was guiding the meditation, right? I didn't take it all that seriously back then because I didn't take my visions too literally. I now come to realize they're a lot more literal than I thought. And so this time, same thing, I went back, and this time I was teaching them how to do the Hool breath. And I became aware that it was a real-time thing for me, but what they were experiencing is that some light being was appearing to them and teaching them this chant, and it was me. I was teaching them the chant that I had been taught, and apparently I had had a vision where I was taught by my own future self. It gets really, really weird. And this is something that Nagas have the power to do. This is the realm of the Nagas. If you want to start playing around with time and past lives and, and what I became aware of, this is also really intense, was that as I was doing this and I was teaching these, my ancestors, I was teaching them the Hool breath. Sorry, I got kind of lost in here. I became aware of something. What was it? Anyway, I lost it. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. It's getting harder to understand. Anyway, but it was the Nagas that created, that facilitated that time warp, where I was at that 2022, and at the same time I was back in 30,000 years ago. And the Naga helped me to understand multiple dimensions, multiple timelines, and helped me to understand who I am in different dimensions. So recently I had, in my interdimensional meditation, I was led to the realm of Vasuki. So if you know, you can go look him up. Vasuki, Vasuki. If you go look him up, you'll find out who he is. But he is actually the Naga that was chopped in half to create the north and south nodes of the moon, which we call Rahu and Ketu. And the mythology behind that is that the gods, the celestial gods, and the terrestrial gods, who don't get along, just like the Aesir and the Vanir, they don't get along, but they have to work together. They were working together to create and bring the nectar of immortality. And so they were using Vasuki as like a rod to stir the ocean of milk. Out of the ocean of milk came poison, which Shiva drank, which is why Shiva has a blue throat, because he's holding the poison in his throat. And then the nectar of immortality was now available. So the celestial gods had a conspiracy. And the conspiracy was that they were going to distract the terrestrial gods so that they wouldn't drink the nectar of immortality. And the excuse they make is because we don't want those demons ruling the universe. They'll get too powerful. And, that's not who they are. They're not demons in the Western Christian sense. They're earthly deities. They're earthly powers. And we can't function without them. Lakshmi could be called an asura. Now, a Vedic would never do that, but that's the truth of the matter. Freya is one of the Vanir, and Freya and Lakshmi are the same essence. We're talking about different vibrations of the same essence. Frey and Prajapati are the same essence, but Prajapati is not called an asura. Indra in the Vedas is called an asura. So anytime you see in the Vedic they talk about the asuras and they call them demons, that's not actually accurate. They're really talking about what we consider to be the Vanir, the terrestrial gods of 3D spacetime. So what the Devas did was they came up with a conspiracy that they weren't going to let the asuras drink the nectar of immortality. So Vishnu transformed himself. He lied. He transformed himself into this sexy belly dancer. And while he's dancing sexily and the terrestrial gods are overcome with lust, looking at what they think is a woman dancing around in a bikini, Vishnu is giving the nectar of immortality to all of the gods. And so before you knew it, all the gods drank the nectar of immortality and the asuras didn't. There was an asura, Vasuki. Vasuki is an asura. He's a powerful being. He's a god in his own right, extremely powerful. And he was allowed to drink the nectar of immortality by Brahma. But it came with a catch. So as he was drinking the nectar of immortality, the sun and the moon both said, he's a demon, he's an asura, kill him. So Vishnu pulled out his chakra weapon and chopped off his head as he was swallowing it. And so since he was swallowing it, he became immortal. But now he was separated. He was a head and a body. And so in Vedic astrology, the head of Rahu is obsession, addiction, ego, all of the things that do not bring happiness. No matter how much money you get, it's never enough. No matter how much sex you get, it's never enough. No matter how much drugs you do, it's never enough. No matter how much fame you get, it's never enough. The obsession for this illusion of reality, instead of understanding it to be a fun, which it should be. We should be enjoying our three-dimensional world as a fun video game. We know when we play video games, we know it's an illusion, but we enjoy it. If you start believing video games are real, you're going to go crazy. So the same with this reality we live in. We become so hypnotized, we forget that it's a video game for the soul. And Ketu is also seen negatively, and Ketu is represented as death. He represents being taken out of this physical life. And so wherever Ketu is in your chart, whatever planets he's associated with, he will bring death to that. So one good example is, now this isn't true in every case, but if you have Ketu conjunct Venus, then love won't mean anything. You'll get married, you'll fall in love, but it will never, you go, there's nothing to this. You'll realize very quickly that you won't get your happiness from being with another person. Now, if Venus is in your chart and is very powerful in really wonderful ways, then you will get a lot of fulfillment out of relationships. But eventually, what happens? People die. Some people love each other and then one person dies and the other person is alone. At some point you have to leave this reality and you have to do it alone. You can't really do it with somebody else. You have to do it alone. And if you don't come to understand that the first love must be the love of your own soul, then you'll never find happiness. So Ketu, wherever he's associated, he brings this understanding that this doesn't mean anything. Fame, money, children, power, wealth, whatever the heck it is that you think is going to bring you happiness. Ketu says it's nothing, it's an illusion. So that's why he's seen as negative. So the poison out of this comes that Vasuki showed me that Rahu and Ketu, these two mathematical points in the sky, are actually refractions. So they're sort of like, when you put light through a prism and, you can project the different bands of colors on things. These are two projections. They're ghost-like projections that influence us. So when they get in front of the moon or get in front of the sun, there's an eclipse. And wherever it is in our birth charts, it shines down on us this sort of window into the fifth dimension. And depending on our spiritual awareness, we will either respond with becoming awakened, we will burn through karma, we will become aware of our attachments, or if we are attached and we're holding on to that and we are resisting our spiritual growth, then it'll make us crazy. It's the poison. The thing that's making us crazy in those moments is fighting against leaving this reality. So when Rahu is helping us, when we are cooperating with the energy of Rahu, which is the karma that brings us into manifestation. More clearly, it's our unfulfilled desires. Desires that you had in previous lives, which you were supposed to fulfill yourself on. If you don't fulfill those desires, Rahu brings you back with an obsession, with something that you want to learn. It can be very helpful. It gives you a lot of... Without Rahu, nobody would do anything. Everybody would just sit on their ass and not accomplish anything. So it brings you a lot of ambition. And the lesson of Rahu is, wherever Rahu is in your chart, he tells you what you need to go do to fulfill your desires. But at the same time, if you make that your spiritual reason for living, you'll become unsatisfied. So the idea is to go after it and do it, enjoy it, and then let it go. Otherwise, the poison of it will turn you into an addict, will turn you into a narcissist, will turn you into, whatever. A spiritual zealot, all of that. Ketu, on the other hand, wherever Ketu is trying to wake you up to understand that this three-dimensional reality will not give you satisfaction. It is only a video game. It's not real. The true satisfaction is on the other side, higher dimensions. If you want to call it the fifth dimension, you can. But if you're attached to the third dimension, then the experience is that your life is being destroyed. And so it can bring insanity. It can bring sadness. It can bring depression. Again, I gave you the example of if somebody's Venus is, sometimes, not every time, but if your Venus is conjunct Ketu, it could mean that you have this horrific time trying to find a marriage partner or falling in love. And you just, it's just horrible. You keep trying to get satisfaction out of sex and love, and it comes up short, and it makes you feel crazy and sad and hopeless and miserable. But if you understand that, Ketu's just trying to help me understand that this, like everything else, love, relationships, sex, in the third dimension is a video game. It's not meant to be something that you get your soul identity from. And so if you understand that and you take relationships for what they are, and going into it that, yes, this is part of the illusion, I'm not going to let this completely take me over, then you can enjoy it for what it is and then let it go. So now I end up always talking longer than I want to, but that's just the way it goes. So take a look at this onion here. This is the closest I could get to explaining what the dimensions are. So look at all the different layers of the onion, and you can see those little red lines going like that. Imagine each one of those lines is a dimensional barrier. And through that onion, you see that, let's imagine that as a shaft of light. At the top of that shaft of light is Shiva. Shiva is sitting at the top of that, the top of Mount Kailash, and he is descending his consciousness down through all of the dimensions. But he's going through all of them. At the bottom of the onion, you can see all of those dimensional lines coming together and merging at the bottom. So they merge at the bottom and they also merge at the top. And we are, like smack dab somewhere in the center of that. If you want to count 3 dimensions, whatever, we're on the 3rd line from the outside, however you want to look at it. And at the bottom of that is where Vasuki lives. So what I learned, which I didn't understand how the dimensions work, is that at the bottom of what we would call the true underworld, there's the underworld that your soul goes to, there's a hell that demons come from. There's a underworld that is beneath all of that, and it's called, and there's a couple names for it. One of them is Patala Loka. And that is where Vasuki lives. He's the Naga. And what he showed me is that he can influence every single being in every single dimension, because they all come together at the bottom and they merge in his realm, which is called Patala Loka. And it's a beautiful place, by the way. There's no external light source, like there isn't a sun or anything like that. But the light that is there is coming from, there's like all of these jewels, all these different colored gems and jewels, and the light from that is filling the place. It's like a beautiful rainbow. It's an amazing place. And I was blown away, because when I was being told that I was going to go to the underworld, I was expecting to see a bunch of unhappy souls and demons. And when I was at the bottom of this, of apparently all of the dimensions, and it was this very beautiful, peaceful, wonderful place. And he explained to me that he has the ability to influence people's path in life in ways they cannot even begin to understand, because he's a Naga. So this is where the Nagas get their reputation for being deceivers. They don't deceive in the way that the Christian devil deceives. What they do is they're able to vibrate consciousness through the different dimensional barriers that will have an effect on your reality. We perceive it as Rahu and Ketu in the sky. You look at your chart, wherever Rahu and Ketu are, that is Vasuki, and he's pulling on the strings inside of your life, guiding you towards awakening. And just like the Naga in the biblical version, if you resist what he's trying to teach you, if you resist whatever life brings towards you, which is going to stimulate that, it's going to stimulate your attachment to the illusion, you can either have an awakening event, or you can have your whole life fall apart. Either way, you will learn the lesson. If you listen to if you're following a spiritual path and Rahu or Ketu brings in some disruption in your 3rd dimensional experience, if you respond to that out of your attachment, you're going to suffer. But you'll still learn the lesson. It's just going to take you another few lifetimes, and you will suffer through that. Whereas if you're following a spiritual path and you are surrendering to the vibration of spirit and your soul, then when Rahu and Ketu come along, you are now given an opportunity to expand into a higher dimensionality, because they're portals. Those projections up in the sky are also portals, which is why we experience it, when there's an eclipse. It looks like there's a hole in the sun or there's a hole in the moon. It's because if it's an eclipse of the sun, it means your soul has an opportunity to escape beyond the third dimension. But if you don't escape beyond the third dimension, you'll feel you're disconnected from your soul. If it's the moon, you'll have the ability to escape to a fifth dimensional experience with your meditative mind. But if you don't operate from your spirit when there's these lunar eclipses, you can go emotionally bonkers. Look at what's happening in the world. People are completely losing it emotionally. It's because of this. And so are Nagas responsible for what's coming up in this solar flash event? Well, they're as responsible as any other being, but they are playing a very powerful role. And this is why at the top, again, looking at the onion, you go to the top of that light shaft, Shiva's at the top. But what is happening? He has Nagas. He has Nagas wrapped around his wrist. He has Nagas wrapped around his neck. And there's a connection because his neck is where he holds the poison. So it's trying to make us understand the poison of the Naga, which Shiva is able to transmute with his consciousness. The poison of the Naga is what destroys your attachment to the third dimension. If you fight that, if you fight the powers of the Naga, you will suffer. I can tell you I did. When I first started interacting with these beings, if you were here June of 2022, you saw me get physically damaged from fighting these concepts that these beings were bringing to me. And so Ketu is the god of death, or he's the god of life. And another way to look at it is that Vasuki he's curling around the dimensional barriers so that you think, his tail is over here and you think his head is over here. He's actually completely connected. It's one being that's connected. So the head of the snake and the tail of the snake are connected, but because it's a higher dimensional being, the rest of his body is in another dimension, but we don't see it. So it looks like he's split in half. The poison is your actual awakening. Shiva represents that because he drank the poison. He drank the poison, and because he is fully conscious, that poison is then becoming his awakening. So what that means is, the reason why worshiping Shiva is something everybody should do at some point is because worship of Shiva is what allows you to shift out of the third dimension in a comfortable way. Whereas without the help of spirit, without the help of consciousness, without the help of Shiva, we are left to our own third dimensional toolkit, which will pretty much guarantee that we will suffer. We will suffer pain, insanity, addiction, loneliness, poverty. There are plenty of rich people who are dying of cancer. All the money in the world isn't giving them the ability to stay healthy or happy. So this is why we worship Shiva, because he can take that poison of the attachment of the third dimension. And let's be clear, Shiva loves the third dimension. Shiva is, he's the complete opposite of your typical monk who purifies themselves and they don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't have sex, and they only meditate, and they don't own anything, and they don't have any pleasures. They're just purely going, the way of I'm denying my human reality so I can go towards the spirit. I got nothing against that. That's somebody's path. Shiva doesn't do that. He drinks, he smokes, he's friends with prostitutes and with drug addicts and with criminals. He's friends with everybody. And his retinue are all of these rejects of society, and they follow him to the most unclean place in society, which is the burial ground. This is where he hangs out. He meditates among all the dead bodies. It's the most unclean place to go. And that's what Shiva represents, that he can be in the midst of all of the third dimensional attachment, which brings death, and he can purify that. This is what the Aghoris are trying to do, by the way. And people misunderstand what the Aghoris are doing. And so people think if they smoke a lot of weed, they'll have an awareness like the Aghoris, but they don't understand Aghoris are doing something completely different. They're not smoking weed because weed helps them. They're smoking weed because weed makes it more difficult. And they have to learn how to focus, even though this chemical is trying to attach them to the third dimension. And people don't understand that. So a lot of people are out there thinking, oh yeah, I'm like an Aghori man, I'm smoking weed, that's what those guys do in India, it's a spiritual thing. No, you're just completely, totally indulging in your attachment to the third dimension and your ego. And you have no idea that that's what's happening. That's why Shiva does that, because he can do it. I can't do it. He can do it though. So the same is true for Shiva as he sits at the top of this onion where all of the dimensions come together and merge. He sits on top of that and he meditates and he sends his consciousness down. And so on the bottom we have the Nagas, which if you're attached, you will see them as these poisonous, evil, tempting, deceptive creatures, when actually they're your best friends, because they understand. They understand the beauty of being attached to whatever dimensional experience there is. And if you work with Nagas, if you chant to them, pray to them, do meditations to them, they will give you an awareness of what is really going on. They will wake you up. You will know what is happening. One of the things that I just saw recently in one of my most recent meditations, which was not an easy thing to see, was as I was meditating, I saw this darkness, and this darkness had a consciousness to it. And the darkness was embarrassed and was hiding from me. But it was there. And whatever being was there, could have been a Naga, said, this darkness has a purpose. And this darkness is going to create more pain and sadness in the world, because that's what people need to wake up. Those people who are still in the haze of the narrative and are still hypnotized, unless they experience something horrible and awful, they won't wake up. And so the Naga was saying, we have to let this run its course. So this is how darkness can be used in a positive way. So if you get an opportunity to chant to the Nagas, you can do that. If you want to have all the benefits of the Naga consciousness and wisdom without taking the risk of going into those weird, dark, hidden places, then worship Shiva. Just chant Om Namah Shivaya. Just by chanting that, you can chant to Nageshwara, which means the Lord of the Nagas. Om Namo Bhagavate Nageshwaraya. You can chant those mantras to be able to see through your own poisonous reaction to the third dimension. And then the Nagas will take you to the highest consciousness possible. Because they live in both realms. They live at the bottom of where all of the underworld, where all of the dimensions come together. They live there and they vibrate, and it goes through all of the dimensions in that onion, and it changes things around. And they are also helping Shiva as he processes the poison. At the top of the onion there, Shiva sits meditating, and the Nagas are surrounding his neck and around his and this is a very powerful place, by the way. This is tremendous amount of energy. This is why if you touch somebody here, you can have a very powerful effect on their energies. So snakes wrapping around that are actually purifying your blood and your energy. Wrapped around your neck, they're purifying all of that, your communication, all that. Anyway, I'm starting to babble, so I'll shut up now. I'm happy to take any actual questions. If you are subscribed to the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong, if you have any questions, if I like your question, I will answer it more than likely. Don't get your feelings hurt if I don't answer it. Okay. Yeah, I can tell if somebody's new to the channel and don't know what we're talking about here, so I'm not going to address any of that. Pure life science, stop. Don't do it. You gotta pick a side. Do you want to be sober or not? You gotta pick a side. What else? Nothing else? Okay, so no real questions. All right, guys. So that's it for me. I don't got anything else I'm thinking. I do want to end with this note, which is that I can definitely feel something shifted after both of these eclipses. I could feel, especially coming up to this lunar eclipse, there was some heavy dark energy. I was getting a headache that wouldn't go away. But even after the first eclipse, I felt something shift. And after the second one, I feel something very positive coming. And as I'm saying that, I'm getting filled with very blissful energy. So something shifted, and I think it's possible we might be heading downhill now. Things might be easier for those of us who are doing the work. I still think there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people have to go through, but one of the reasons why I don't take questions is because what I used to do before is it was my job. It was my job to ruthlessly point out your unconsciousness and your resistance, and to slice through all of it and get to the heart of it in the hopes of waking you up. That has been my job. That job is over. Now, like me, what you do is you just sit back and watch. If people haven't made the choice, and there's still, there's always time. People can choose to move in the opposite direction whenever they want. But if they haven't made a choice by now, there's really nothing any of us can do or say that's going to change that. So really, we're waiting for the bus. We're preparing ourselves. We still need to continue to do the work to shift our frequency up so that we can go into this next higher harmonic where Mother Earth is going to reincarnate. We still have to do the work for that. I'm not done doing that. I'm still working very hard on myself. But in terms of, being that antagonistic force for good, I'm no longer doing that. Whatever decisions people make is out of my hands anymore. If somebody really wants my help, they can, become an apprentice, or they can get a session with me, and I'll be happy to help somebody who wants my help. But I'm not gonna go trying to save people as they're walking into the meat grinder. The choice has been made. Time's up. It's over. It's now time to get ready. It's time to start packing our bags and get ready for whatever is coming. I don't know when that's going to happen or how it's going to happen, but even if nothing huge happens, the shift has already begun, and people are starting to move into a completely different thought process and energy pattern. And I'm really excited about it. So I just wanted to give some positivity. Again, if you're new to the channel and you want to have access to these tools, we got 923.thunderwizard.com. We've got the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong, which is here at thunderwizard.com. We've got the free stuff on the channel. Go to the playlists and use the free meditations and practices. I'm giving it away. Please make use of it so that you can evolve. And of course, my books you can get at michaelwilliamdenny.com, or you can just go to Amazon, Kindle, or Audible and punch my name in, and my books will come up. All right. Anything come up since then? Nope. All right then. Thank you guys for showing up. I love you all. I'm sending you my love and my encouragement. And if I don't get beamed up to the Starship Enterprise, and or if the Flash don't come, I will see you all very soon. Please take good care of yourselves.